Good evening, everyone, and welcome to The Gathering. I'm one of the hosts, Paul Rook, and tonight we are joined by... let's start with Kerry Greenaway. Hello.
Good evening. Hello.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Oh, I bet you're shattered after last night, aren't you?
Yes, just a little bit.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that in a little while. So let's also introduce Richard Clements.
Hi guys, yeah, you've got the boss in the room tonight, so be good.
Best behaviour.
And I'm keeping an eye on you all.
I bet.
but I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys got up to last night, so yeah, looking forward to that.
It was very interesting. And we're also joined by Andy Mercer today.
Hello, the non-host, the guy who kind of floats around in the background mainly.
That's it.
I'll leave you guys to do
then we get all our valuable information from you anyway, so yeah.
I do what I can. Yeah, I'd like to hear about what happened last night as well. It all sounds quite intriguing. So
it was. I mean, last night we ended up at the True Crimes Museum in Hastings for a Trident event, and yeah, it threw up some really good results, really. I mean, we had Kerry Greenaway. She decided to put up some crystal grids in various places, but I'll let Kerry say exactly where she put them.
Okay. Yeah. The first one I put up between the Amelia Dyer and the John Hay exhibitions, because previous investigations have shown up some really good spirit box results. So I wanted to see if I could improve the energy to maybe get a bit more physical evidence going on there. And then the second grid I set up by they've got a gangland exhibition which covers like the craze and football hooliganism and those kind of crimes. So I set the second one up there, and I used Herkimer diamonds in the grid. Which I thought might hopefully, well, they're really powerful crystals in their own right, but I thought that might attract, that kind of mentality of ghost. And then the third grid I set up in the actual real, like there was a bath there and a hangman's noose and a skull and a bed that they used for the lethal injections. And I actually put one of the grids on the bed, and they did have quite good results via app and Ouija and being touched around that area. So that's why I put that one there as well. So yeah, it was really interesting to because of the location, it's set out in very specific areas. You could tailor the grid more specifically to the type of energy you wanted to attract. So that's what was quite interesting about that location, Paul.
Yeah, I know a couple of the guests also reported seeing shadow people as well. Do you know whereabouts that was?
No, I didn't hear about that.
Okay, yeah.
I was with a bit of a different group, wasn't I?
Yeah, it was just a couple of the guests after when they came out, they said to me like they saw shadow people just ducking and diving in the caves and stuff, which was quite interesting. And we also tried the human pendulum experiment. Now,
yes,
although
tell me more about this, because I keep getting Jay and Teresa are very intrigued, and I don't actually know what it is myself.
See, I think with looking at it from a sceptical point of view, people tend to sway naturally. So I just think it's amplifying that. But when you're actually in the middle and being used as a human pendulum, it almost feels like someone's influencing you and pushing you to either side. Now, I don't know. Obviously, I mean, Kerry is more a spiritual person than I am, so she might be able to give you a better idea.
Okay, there are two ways of doing a human pendulum. Now, the first is you have a circle of people and then a person in the middle. And what that person in the middle does is basically goes into a form of meditative state. And then the people around the circle are there to sort of add a level of protection to that person, but also to catch them if they go off balance and fall. And then what you do is you ask questions, and depending on the way that the person sways, it's a bit like using a crystal pendulum. You know, you tell the spirit that move the person forward for a yes or back for a no. And that's basically how you do. You ask questions and see how the person sways. Now, the second method is the method we used last night, which is where you have the person still in the middle, and you have a person in front, and you have a person behind. And then you have people behind them, and you push the person right at the back, pushes their energy through the person in front of the person who's being the pendulum. And then, again, forward for yes, back for no. And it's incredibly interesting, the results you get. But I do agree with you. There is a certain level of, if you stand there, go into a meditative state, then you have got that unbalance yourself naturally. But these people are swaying quite a lot. And when you ask questions, it is quite intriguing with some of the results that come out of that. I mean, we did it with 4 different people last night, didn't we, Paul?
Yeah, and I must admit, it looked a little bit more than a natural sway, because some of them, it almost looked like they were literally being pushed forward and backwards, because it was almost like they were being toppled over, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, which is why it's important to have people there to catch the person, because if it's a big sway, there's a lot of trust involved in this, though. Whoever's in the middle has to really trust. Sorry, the dog is wandering around and full of beans tonight. There is a lot of trust that the person who's being the pendulum has to have on the people, because obviously you could fall over, and it's that trust factor that you're gonna be caught. Do you know what I mean? If you do lose your balance, but it worked. It was very interesting. It's always very interesting when you do a human pendulum.
Yeah, I do like that experiment, just simply because of what the person that's in the middle says afterwards. Because there's some people that says, they don't hear the questions, but yet they still answer them, and it's just a weird feeling. But you really have to experience that, I think.
Yeah.
What do you think is actually moving them?
Do you know what?
Kerry?
I don't know, to be honest.
I think the point with the pendulum, whether or not you're using a crystal pendulum or whether or not you're using yourself as a human pendulum, I go back to your conscious mind is only picking up like 40% of what's around you, whereas your subconscious mind is picking up a lot more information. So there's the theory that your subconscious is picking up energy and information that you're not aware of on a conscious level. So it could be that. It could be spirit, a spirit is stepping forward and causing the human pendulum or the, crystal pendulum to move. It's just incredibly interesting to see it being done and see it being worked. I mean, I've seen it done I did an investigation in Pluckley, and there we came across a swing hanging from a tree, and the medium who was with us actually picked up a spirit in the area, and so we put a person on the swing and did a pendulum that way with the person just sat on the swing. Now, to get a swing moving, you have to put the effort in physically. You can see that person doing that, but this person that was on the swing was literally just sat there holding onto the ropes, and this swing literally was spinning around and twisted so hard round that the ropes were like coiled around each other in response to questions we were asking. Now, I can't explain that. I can't explain that on a scientific or a sensible logistic level, because I know whenever I've sat on a swing, I've had to physically put the effort in to get the swing to do that. But you could tell she wasn't. So that was really interesting. So I've seen it done like that too.
Okay.
There's sort of like a precedent. Sort of talking to Andy here, sort of like in occult circles. Do you see any sort of similarities in these sorts of experiments, Andy, with sort of a more sort of ancient sort of techniques and stuff?
Now, that's a difficult question to answer because... No, it's probably the best answer I can give you there, really. I mean, you're talking about a different kind of form of experimentation. In sort of, you're working with occult rituals, you're dealing with direct communication with something that's very deliberate, very specific. It's, you pick up the phone to ring somebody in particular. You're not sort of just dialing randomly to see who comes through to talk to you. So it's quite a different field. When I haven't sort of been actually on ritual work for quite a long time. I'm more of a researcher these days and writer. But certainly you are doing specific things to create specific results. You aren't necessarily just trying to pick up what's around you. So that's probably the biggest difference in the two. I mean, you do get obviously things where using crystals, etc., is a common phenomenon. And going back in time to sort of, I know, Elizabethan times, it was very popular to try and find hidden and buried treasure. Where obviously we didn't have the sort of banks as we've got today, and your valuables, money you didn't need straight away was often you'd bury it somewhere, you'd hide it. And of course, money's hidden away, you die, pass away for whatever reason, the money's sort of left hidden away. So it was quite a common practice to use maps to try to figure out where hidden treasure might be found, where it was just people hiding away their valuables. And things like holding a crystal over a map to see if it moved to a particular or would swing as you moved them around the map was a method of trying to find hidden or buried treasure that people had left behind. But as I say, when it comes to you're talking about sort of physical movement. You obviously you intone rituals. You move your arms about and say various things, but it's all very deliberate to a purpose, to an end. It's not sort of just to see what you can invite in. So it's different in that respect.
Oh, right, yeah. Well, so you're going out looking for treasure. I've actually I'm a bit of an amateur metal detectorist myself, and I'm still out there trying to find that hoard. But perhaps I should try the crystals instead.
Well, you never know. Well, certainly that was the only method they had in those days. If you didn't sort of try and employ supernatural methods, because obviously if a person had a lot of money and they'd hidden it and buried it somewhere, and then they did die without to the immediate family, then no one would know where it was. But it was common practice to sort of bury your treasure, bury your valuables, bury your money, because there was nowhere to keep it safe otherwise. You were sort of, particularly in John Dee as an example, may have done things like that himself. If he was away for a period of time, he may well have just buried money in the garden somewhere. But yeah, I don't think he did. But that's the kind of people we're talking about, who may have been away from home for a period of time and couldn't necessarily trust your house wouldn't get broken into. Indeed, Dee himself had his house broken into when he came back for his last trip to Europe. In fact, it had been raided and quite a lot of property had been stolen. So, to hide stuff was a common practice, to bury it and then perhaps to get forgotten about. And Edward Kelly particularly was obsessed with that kind of idea of finding a buried hidden treasure, and was using all sorts of methods to acquire what was been buried. Because
this actually had a bit of a resurgence back in the early 80s. I know I've spoken with you about this before with psychic questing. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are definitely parallels there. Again, you would sit and try to meditate on particular vibrations or feelings, if you like. You'd sit and literally start to see if you could pick up anything mentally in your mind's eye of anything that was going on. So you would focus that way, and then it might take you to particular locations, and that's really how questing would begin. And often you'd acquire items that you would find at those sites. You get vibes from those things, and they'd lead you further on. So, I mean, there are some parallels in that respect, certainly.
Didn't the CIA do a research into remote viewing for the war?
Well, that's a big question. It's been suggested by certain quarters. It's one of those kind of topics that's quite popular. I think there's probably more evidence that the KGB may have investigated the idea during the subsequent files that become available with the collapse of the Soviet Union, that have suggested they may well have put serious efforts and research into it. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if the CIA didn't at least give it a try, because certainly in the 60s they were looking for any kind of advantage or any kind of way of spying on the Russians to find out more information. So it's entirely possible, certainly. And again, I wouldn't be too surprised the Nazis didn't experiment with such things. But, concrete evidence of this sort of thing is often hard to come by. And in the lack of concrete evidence, people tend to fill in the blanks themselves of all sorts of conspiracy theories about supposed remote viewers have been highly successful. But when you try and nail down the evidence, independently verify it, it's often quite weak, to be honest with you. So, yeah, the experiments with it, certainly, there's no reason why they wouldn't. But whether they got any results from it would be another matter. It's one of those things that's far more... It's kind of... It just sort of happens. If you're researching, you're working with psychic questing, it kind of just happens by itself. It presents itself to you rather than you deliberately trying to find stuff. I mean, some of the groups I kind of worked with, it was more of a case of, I had this weird dream about this place. I think it's nearby. Let's go and investigate and see where it takes us, or on meditation. And often it was nothing, get there and the location, no similarity to what you've been thinking of, or if you've been there before. There was nothing happening. There was nobody around. There was nothing strange going on. But just occasionally you sort of struck something, and strange things would be afoot at the very time you thought they were. I mean, a particular occasion, just very briefly, I might have mentioned before, but I did an experiment with a friend of mine, this is years ago, and I was getting the sense of a particular park in Cambridge, just outside Cambridge, the city of Cambridgeshire. And I just described to my friend a scene of this park, the car park, and what we're liable to encounter there. I've never been there before in my life, and it's actually an old Iron Age fort, it's on a raised hill, basically. So we drove up there, got to the car park, and I'd seen a line of very tall and narrow trees. The tall, narrow trees were there. I saw what was a man, a woman, or two men, or two women, two people anyway. One was wearing what looked like, in my vision this is, like a long cloak. When we got there, two people walked past us. One was wearing a very long raincoat. This is at night, of course. So the imagery was quite similar to what I'd described. In my mind, I'd seen us go up to this raised area of the Iron Age fort, and on the far side of the fort there was a fire burning, like a sort of built wood fire, and people were at the wood fire. Got up there, and there was no one there. Nothing at all. No sign of fire, no sign of anybody. So the second part of what I envisioned was completely wasn't true, but the first part was spookily accurate for me. It was exactly as I'd seen it, a place I'd never been before, and the two people walking past us, one looking like they're wearing a cloak was actually wearing a long coat, but in the dark it looked like a cloak. It was quite similar to what I described only a few hours before. So that's kind of how questing works. But I've obviously seen experience of the human pendulum at locations and investigations. I'm a bit skeptical of it. I know, how the body works with idiomotor responses to questions, and it can be that you don't realise you're giving a response. When your eyes are closed in the dark, you tend to kind of micro-move all the time, just trying to make sure your position's safe and you're not going to fall over. And that can get exaggerated, whether intentionally or otherwise. So, I have an open mind on most things, as you know. But, so that's my experience.
It's just really interesting when you see it happening. Do you know what I mean? And the force that the person's swaying is a lot more than it would be if they just stood there with their eyes shut. Do you know what I mean? It is really interesting. Like you say, you can't say what's moving that person, whether or not even that they could even be, and I'm just throwing it out there as being a devil's advocate, they could even be faking it, because obviously they're in front of a group of people. It's a bit like the actor syndrome. Do you know what I mean? Play into the crowd. You can't take that out. You can't take that out because you can't prove it. Do you know what I mean?
Although at the same token, I'll play the other side of that. I have seen people who were ardent skeptics on investigation suddenly find themselves unable to explain why they were moving in a circle of people around them, that they very much are feeling it and don't like the fact they're feeling it because they don't believe it's possible. So I've seen the other side of the coin, people who don't believe it haven't been affected by it. So again, psychology involved. It might be that they're unwillingly realising that they're trying to play to something that is getting a bit of attention, that, oh, look, this is really happening to me. Wow. I don't know. It's possible. But it's a fascinating thing. I say I don't discount most things. I think there's some validity to most ideas.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of stuff we used to do at school, sort of play at school, like when you were going on about sort of automotive responses. There was the thing when you got two friends that used to squeeze you side by side for a minute or so, and then then you would relax, and they would sort of stand aside, and then your arms would slowly lift up side by side. And I'm wondering whether that's whether that could be something to do with it.
It's a motor response. Yeah, it is. It's a physical thing in your body that does that. The muscle reacts back to having a push in one direction. It tends to react back the other direction. So you will get that strange effect as well. I also see people use techniques that come from NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming. It's a way of dealing with problems. But I've seen techniques that I recognise as being physical movement techniques from NLP being employed as supposedly sort of spiritual activities and actions. And one guy kind of quietly questioned about what he was doing. He was like, shut up, I know you know what I'm doing, so go away, leave me alone. So fair enough, I'll say no more. but I knew what he was doing was a very little clever idiomotor trick, effectively, to make the idea that people were feeling heat in their hands, which was just the fact they'd been moving their hands about, so of course it felt warm. It wasn't, but he was having them believe they were creating these like invisible fireballs in their hands and throwing them. It was like, blimey.
So I'd like to go back to I'd like to go back to something Kerry said when she was going on about like the CIA, and their supposed or alleged sort of activities in these sorts of experiments. You, Andy, were involved with a interview with Uri Geller, I believe, and did he touch on this? Because he has actually sort of said that he sort of worked for the CIA. Am I correct in that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We were quite fortunate in my old show. He was doing a lot of promotional work for his new book about his secret work with the CIA. He's an amazingly interesting character. He's one of those people that you want to believe everything he's saying is absolutely true, and it probably is, but, he's very much a showman. He's very much, he knows how to sort of work his crowd and work the audience. But it was absolutely fascinating listening to him talk about it. He very genuinely believed he was doing this work with the CIA and with Mossad, he said on the show as well. But, whether that produced anything, is he going to tell us? Because obviously by virtue of being CIA or Mossad activity, it's top secret. So they're not going to be too pleased in him telling all the stories and tales of, what he's actually been doing with them. And there was a sense of a bit of, buy the book to find out kind of theme running through that part of the interview. But his more general discussion about it was fascinating. Certainly his experiences in the spoon bending experiments, one of the most interesting parts of the conversation when he first met James Randi. And he was tried to be very friendly and polite to James Randi and say, you've actually helped me build my career because you've talked about me. And Randi told him basically to F off, which was very unpleasant, which I thought was a rather pathetic response, really. It was more of a case of, well, I don't care, go away. So, fair enough. But, no, absolutely fascinating chap to talk to, certainly. And the same, you want to believe everything's true that he's saying, whether it's a bit of how much it is reality, how much it is showmanship, that's open to debate, I think.
I'd also like to talk to Kerry because you're sort of you're doing a bit of a crossover at the moment with your crystal work, because principally you were using your crystals for healing, weren't you? And now you're sort of taking it into the paranormal investigative field. And how is that sort of coming along? And are you getting a sort of a crossover?
Yeah, I don't do healing. I just like to point that out. I work more on, not on a physical healing side of things. I don't touch that side of things. Obviously, I know what crystals are supposed to help what ailments, but from a personal level, I don't like to go into that realm. I like to work on an emotional and mental side with the crystals, and obviously with my interest of paranormal, it is interesting because I do believe crystals have specific energies, and I do think they bridge the gap between the physical world and the spiritual world. I do feel that, because my personal journey has taken me into I've learned and worked in so many different areas since I started my business. So it's just been strange how crystals came into my life. It was very strange how my business evolved out of my life. And I believe it is all down to having and working with crystals. So my interest in the unexplained and the paranormal, I've always had that. But then the opportunity to work in that field only presented itself once I started working with crystals. So it seemed a very natural progression, to be honest with you. And it was actually Kerry Ann who said, come along to a paranormal investigation. I'd like you to work crystal gridding, because she'd seen me crystal gridding for intention work, putting it out on my page and, talking about it on my business page and stuff like that. And she said, I'd like to see if you could do that in the field. So it was actually Kerry Ann who came up with me starting that journey. And we've done investigations with the gridding, and we've had some really good results. And then we tried doing an investigation without any crystals whatsoever, and it was the deadest investigation you could have got. It just didn't seem to, nothing seemed to happen. Now that could just be how many nights have we all spent out there and nothing's happened? I mean, it happens an awful lot. But it did seem that when we had the crystal gridding and stuff like that going on, that we had a better response rate, I suppose you want to call it. Now, I can't prove that. I can't prove the crystals are doing that. But it's, like I say, it's very, very infant in my work. I'm working on what crystals work best in that field, what crystals don't. Sometimes it's hit and miss, but we do seem to get a better response when we're using crystal gridding and when we're using crystals. But like I say, again, I do like to play devil's advocate because I can't prove it scientifically. It's very early stages of working gridding and stuff like that in a crystal field, in the paranormal field. So, but yeah, that's sort of how I crossed over. Now, I know a lot of people in the paranormal field. I know a lot of people in the crystal world, and it always creates a lot of interest. Everybody's very interested in how you use crystals, and generally, most people carry a crystal when they're investigating, and they'll go, "Oh, I've actually got my crystal down my bra or in my pocket." Do you know what I mean? And they've already sort of like started that crossover into the paranormal world with crystals. And like Andy has said, crystals have been used in ritual work, intention work for years, millions, thousands of years. So it kind of makes sense that it should come along into the paranormal world. On a scientific basis, I can't prove it.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I'm quite surprised that people keep them down their bras. I mean, and where do you keep your crystal ball, Andy?
Very safely in a nice wooden box. It's not being used. I mean, certainly if you were to talk about the scientific route, there's no doubt we know for a fact that crystals themselves do vibrate. Obviously, quartz watches. The quartz vibration is what your watch uses to keep the time because it's very consistent, it's very accurate. Yeah. And it does vary in speed of vibration depending on which crystal you're talking about. And one of the theories, scientific pathway, is the fact that the body obviously also has vibration within it, that vibration is altered or changed, slowed down, sped up, whatever, by particular crystals being close by. That's the theory. How real it is a matter, of course, but that certainly is the theory, definitely.
Yeah, and so you're just taking that into the paranormal field. But like you say, although specific crystals are used in everyday objects, because you're dealing with a realm that we can't prove either, it's a bit of a like conundrum. It's a bit of a, it's a bit difficult, but it's interesting. Again, it's another aspect that makes investigating incredibly interesting to me, and I just feel incredibly lucky that I'm able to work with something that I adore doing, which is my crystal work, and something to do with the paranormal, which again is another passion of mine. So I feel incredibly blessed that I've been given the opportunity to work with two of my passions together. I couldn't ask for better, really.
Absolutely.
Does I understand, Paul, you actually do keep a lot of crystals around your flat, do you? And
yeah, I've got a box full of different crystals, and yeah, one of the guests actually made a little box for me with different crystals in. Now, I mean, although there are certain crystals that I like and I'm drawn to, I don't know what they do. So, yeah, to me, it's just a box of pretty stones, but
I have offered to I was going to say I've offered to come around and rummage in your box, Paul, so you can't sort of like
I'll
say you haven't got the means.
Absolutely, but I would like to learn more about them, and like last night, for example, we had the crystal gridding, so I would like to learn more about it and stuff, and I'm sure I will.
I must admit, I think I may have missed something. How exactly does the crystal gridding work, Kerry?
It links it. Crystal gridding is all about the sacred geometry. There are certain patterns that occur naturally within the universe and on Earth, and that See, it gets a bit scientific, and I don't know the right terms, so please correct me. I'm really not good with the scientific terms. But they're reoccurring shapes and patterns that occur in nature, universe. Just look at how Venus moves around the Earth. It turns into almost like a flower effect. And it basically distills down to two major shapes. You have the Metatron cube, and you have the flower of life. Now, within those two shapes, or patterns, you find them reoccurring all through the world. Now, Plato distilled this down further to come up with the 7 platonic solids, which basically is the cube, the sphere, the pyramid, the hexagonal, the toroid, and it goes into the gonadals, and that's where I'm not quite sure the technical terms from them. I should really know those ones, but they reoccur. I know, so far so good. Keep going. And those shapes reoccur, and they basically respond to vibration of sound as well. So when you've seen the plate that a vibration is passed through, it will when you've got like grains of rice or sugar or something, they create patterns, and these patterns tend to be the ones that reoccur naturally. So what the theory is that because these are naturally occurring through sound and through physics of movement, and they've evolved through evolution naturally, that you can create that pattern with crystals, and then that amplifies and sends signals out to the universe, to the energy around you, to bring in whatever it is you're trying to manifest, which is why the meanings of the crystals become quite important within a crystal grid, because the meanings of the crystals will give the shape of the grid, the meaning and the intention that you're trying to work with. So that is the theory behind a crystal grid. Now, I use crystal gridding for a lot of manifestation work in my work. On anything you're trying to manifest or put an intention out there, you can use a crystal grid for. So obviously, when I'm out in the field in the paranormal world, I'm looking to try and bridge the gap between the physical and the spiritual, and allow the energy of the grid to make it easier for spirit to contact us and actually be able to interact with us. So that's what I'm trying to do in the field, and that's why a grid is I feel quite useful in the paranormal field.
No, I understand. It makes perfect sense. Do you know about the Sri Yantra from Hindu mysticism? There's like a...
No, tell me.
Oh, okay. It's... I was hoping you'd say yes.
She's got to know now.
I have. Now you have to tell me.
The Sri Yantra. It's a symbol that comes from Hindu mysticism. It's overlapping right way up an inverse triangle as it builds into a three-dimensional pyramid-like effect, which again is like a universal resonator, effectively. So it's something that you should definitely look into, the Sri Yantra. I shall send you a link of information to that, and anyone else wants to figure out what the Sri Yantra is, look it up on Google. You can find a lot of information about it there. But effectively,
you're talking about the pyramid theory, where they've done experiments of grapes, and they put like a grape inside a pyramid. It's like a power pyramid, isn't it? And then the grape lasts a lot longer. And then there's people that meditate inside a pyramid because they feel that is a really incredibly powerful shape, and it's a regeneration shape. It's almost like, is that what you're referring to?
No.
Oh, that's something completely different. All right, okay.
Well, no, I mean it's got the same kind of properties, if you like, it's believed to have, but it's like a symbol of the universe. Again, it's that universal resonator. That's what caught my ear on what you were saying about the sacred geometry, which I know a bit about, of course. But the specific you were talking about, the Sri Yantra, is that kind of symbolism that has that kind of resonator.
Yeah, I mean, you only got to look at the pyramids of Egypt, haven't you?
Yes. It's a universal symbol that occurs everywhere, the triangle, that kind of thing. But the yantras themselves, there are a number of them that link to the chakras as well. If you know about chakras, they link to that. So, yeah, that's right, they're all linked together.
So, Kerry, are you coming with us to Chatham Wood?
Yeah, I'm hoping to. I've got to still sort babysitter out, but I am seriously working on that one. I really want to go.
Perhaps would you like to do some grid work down there and sort of give us a demonstration, do you think?
Oh, definitely. What I'll actually do though is bring because part of my other in my business, I do crystal gridding picture grids, and basically it is what it says. It's a picture grid, and I make up a grid and stick it into a picture frame. So you can, a lot of healers have bought those, and there's been one that's been put into a hospital for healing, and shamans have got them, and they're quite a sideline that I do for my business. So when I do open air investigations, I'll have to take a picture frame basically, so I don't lose any of my crystals amongst the forest, because I don't like losing crystals. I'm a bit precious about my crystals. But yeah, that's definitely something I'll be doing.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
It's fascinating. Yeah, you can have a rummage. I'll let you.
Yeah.
But what was interesting last night, I set them up obviously at the beginning, and after we finished, now I am going to say this location gets quite damp, yeah. But when I pulled down the grid, when I took down the grid from the bed that we had, the lethal injection bed, the crystals felt very sticky and dirty, and that's usually an indication of the crystal absorbing negative energy out from the atmosphere. And I've had to do some serious cleansing work today on the crystals I took with me to the True Crimes Museum, because even though I didn't use every crystal that I took with me, they had this almost like greasy, oily residue on them. Now, again, I like to play devil's advocate. It could just be because they got condensation because it was quite damp in there. But when Mark, it's a shame Mark's not in, but he was with me when I was taking them down, because I had to leap over a fence to set that particular grid up. I said to him, fill these, and these were the ones that had been in the box and hadn't been used. And then I said, fill these, and he went, oh my goodness. And he goes, that was the first time I felt a huge difference in the energy of the crystals that were used. So he felt it. Do you know what I mean? He felt there was a difference in the energy for the crystals, for the ones that had been used in the grid to the ones that hadn't been used that night. So it's just really interesting when you're feeling it, and you can't explain that on a scientific. You can't get a little gadget out and measure it. Do you know what I mean? But it's interesting because you feel it.
Yeah. What's the most unusual thing you feel has happened when you've used them?
The most I had was, I had a client, I do private one-on-one appointments when somebody wants crystals and they want to talk more. Sometimes if they're local, they can come round and I'll give them an hour slot and we'll talk through whatever aspect of crystals that they're after. And this particular client wanted a specific crystal for a specific intention. I'm not going to tell you what it was about. It's personal. But I gave her an amethyst crystal, and she literally near on passed out, and it was so strong. And she was like, oh my God, that's my crystal. It's like, yeah. But that's what I do. I'm really, really good. That's one thing I did find as my business has gone along, because my interest in crystals and minerals has always been on an aesthetic level pre my business. I hadn't really looked into the healing side of them. It was just because I loved the geology of crystals. I'm not a geologist, but I'd go to the Natural History Museum and I'd spend more time with crystals looking at them than I would anything else. And as I say, how I got into crystals to sell was a whole different story. But when I first started buying crystals in to sell, and I started researching each particular crystal, that it opened up the whole realm on the spiritual side as well. So that linked into my my love of the unexplained. So, it's extraordinary how crystals have affected my life and the lives of people that work with them on a daily basis in whatever way they use them, whether they have them on their table at if they're a reader and they're having them on the table, they just find it so much easier to work. Even down to a basic, you get a headache, put an amethyst crystal on your forehead, and within an hour that headache dissipates. Even like I say, even on a very basic level. Another lady I had, her son was forever having issues with his ear, nose and throat, going to hospital, had grommets fitted, all sorts of things this poor kid had gone through. And I said, just a carnelian, just put it in the water when he washes, doing a carnelian gem elixir. It's very simple. It's very, very easy. It's very cost effective as well. Don't stop his everyday treatment either. I would say that's a disclaimer out there. You should use it alongside any other treatment that you're having, but use it as an extra tool, as it were. And literally, she could not believe the difference. And then she lost the crystal, and he had his worst. He went right back downhill. And she came around. She was like, "Give me another crystal because I've lost that other one, and he's gone back downhill." So she swears to that. So is it a placebo effect? Some people would argue it is. I personally believe it's not. And crystals have been used in healing and for lots of different reasons for thousands and thousands of years. So, that's my argument. But yeah, I've seen some very powerful things happen with crystals.
Excellent. I've could actually say I did do geology at school at A-level, and it was quite possibly the most boring subject I've ever studied. It was dreadful. I mean, in a classroom of only 6 people studying crystallography, which is the formation of crystals, I actually fell asleep to the point I banged my head on the desk. Oh. The guy, basically what happened, we had 2 different lecturers. The first one, Mr. Clark, left, and his replacement, whose name I can't even remember, but he was incredibly boring. As exciting as Mr. Clark made geology, and it was, this guy made it as boring. It really was dire. And unfortunately, I never finished it. He left. I left the class and went elsewhere. It was so in the A-level part of it. It was just too much. I mean, literally banging your head on the desk. When there's only 6 of you in the room, it's kind of noticeable. But we all agreed his method of teaching was just so incredibly dull. But when I look back, you were talking about the geometric patterning that forms in crystal formation. It is itself absolutely fascinating. Those shapes that form just naturally, and there's no force behind it. There's nothing particularly making them grow that certain way, but they still grow into these amazing patterns.
Yeah, very much so. And you find it even within the structure of crystals as well. And it, like I say, it occurs everywhere. Even if you look at an eye of a chameleon, you can see that pattern, those sacred shapes occurring in even something like that. It's absolutely fascinating to me.
Absolutely. I mean, as you say, that it's also called the golden ratio, that kind of patterning. You do see that naturally everywhere. It is it's amazing. I mean, we are geared to see patterns anyway. That's how the human mind works. So we are more cognitively biased towards pattern formation, and we'll often see patterns in things when there aren't patterns there. Also, we're quite famous in the paranormal world. We are geared to seeing human faces everywhere, even in random patterns that have no resemblance of a face. So our minds will attempt to create faces, which is why people say they see faces in orbs, that kind of thing. But yeah, our minds are geared to see these things because they are everywhere. That kind of geometric patterning, as you say, the formation of so many things isn't just sort of random all over the place. It's forming in very specific ways.
That's it. And you also get it with your hearing as well. You get audio pareidolia as much as you do visual pareidolia. Yes. So you are right. The mind is trained and, structured to see patterns or hear words when they're made out of chaos, I suppose you want to call it. So it is, I just find the whole subject incredibly interesting. And to be fair, I'm quite a baby in the field. I mean, I've only been selling crystals for like 3 years now. And I'm learning all the time. I say I don't touch the healing side of it. I've had crystal healing, and the 2 times I've had the crystal healing have been some of the most profound and emotional, I suppose is the better word, experiences I've had. I mean, I do meditate on a regular basis with crystals. So when I go for a crystal healing, I probably go a lot deeper than some people would because I'm used to working with crystals in that way. But both times have been incredibly powerful and cathartic as well.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I mean, it could be it's just the power of your mind, but that mind's going to be a powerful thing anyway. But even if it's just the focusing of your mind on that crystal, that will have an effect in itself. So it can still be purely your mind, but having the item there to focus on can make that difference itself. Absolutely.
Very much so. I mean, I have to have a tool to work with, whether I'm working in the paranormal field, whether I'm working crystals, whether I'm doing tarot reading, because, you know, tarot cards are, again, another tool. You know, I like to have a tool to work. I struggle so much trying to work in any form of psychic level when I haven't got a tool to work with. So I do like a tool. Now, my one that I find resonates with me the best is crystals.
Fair enough. So, yes, you work with what you most feel comfortable with, certainly.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so.
The other guys speak now because they've been very quiet for a long time.
I was going to say, have they dropped out? Is it just me and you, Andy?
No. It's all very interesting. I'd like to go back to the sort of like the geometry side and the sacred geometry, which Andy touched upon. I mean, would this be the same sort of stuff? Because I've sort of like heard like the cathedral builders, the medieval cathedral builders actually incorporated this sort of natural geometry to ensure they got acoustically sound cathedrals.
Certainly working with the golden ratio to create sort of those kind of, again, geometric patterning, which has a resonance in itself. Yeah, I mean, that's something that, again, goes, as Kerry was talking about before, goes back to the ancient Greeks, the golden ratio, the proportions of things enlarging. So that was certainly a factor that they factored into their work, if you like. Also the idea of the sacred nature of that space that you're talking about, sacred space itself. Yeah. So you want it to have that kind of resonance because of the way it's built, its form and design. So you take those kind of factors into account, definitely.
Yeah, because they sort of worked on the principle that if it looks aesthetically pleasing to the eye, you know, sort of like a certain geometric shape, it does have more properties than just the visual look of it, you know, and it will have, you know, perfect resonant properties and all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
It sort of also links into a little bit of physics, because you wouldn't be able to hold the building up if it wasn't physically possible to do so. So naturally, these buildings and these architects have to make it so it works on a physical level. You know these, the arches and stuff like that. It has to be on a physics level possible to do. So naturally, these architects are having to incorporate these kind of laws of physics to keep the churches up, I would think. There must be a level to that too. That was very basic, very dumbed down version of that, wasn't it?
You hit important points. I mean, if you think about most of the cathedrals in this country, with one exception, they're all 500 years old, and they're still standing. They're still quite solid. They have no signs of them collapsing. So you are definitely taking into account the stresses and strains in the shaping. And if nature is giving you an indicator of how you can achieve that, you'll follow that pattern, certainly.
Yeah, because you sort of like look at these. We was in York not all that long ago with Paul and Tara, and you look at the York Minster, and it's it's an incredible building. From the outside, I've been in it a few years ago now, but again, you walk around the flying buttress ceilings and everything, and just the sheer scale of space inside these places, and it must have been absolutely awe-inspiring to the people that used to visit these places.
And it's quite awe-inspiring. Sorry.
No, I'm going, Karen.
It's quite awe-inspiring now. I don't know about the back in the day. I think it's quite awe-inspiring, that building now. I love that building.
My children live in Canterbury, and I often pop into Canterbury Cathedral. It's just something else. Really, really.
Yeah, it's another beautiful building. But going back, again, sorry, Andy, carry on.
I was just going to say, if you think the other amazing about these buildings is, with the one exception, apart from anything built in the 20th century, there's only one cathedral that one person would have seen the beginning of being built and then completion. Most of them took hundreds of years to be built, and nobody would ever have, from the original architect's ideas to the final completion of the cathedrals, people were long gone. It took over 100 years plus to build these sorts of places. So it's fascinating that they continue to keep that same design of a designer who may well have passed away a long time before, but they were passing on the knowledge of how to construct these places to make them stand and survive the test of time.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm talking over you.
I take it you're talking about Coventry Cathedral as the one that's been constructed within human memory.
Well, no, because that's the new one. Of course, it's pretty modern. Yeah. I'm talking about St Paul's Cathedral was the only one that's of the classic Renaissance period, of course, that was built, designed, and the architect Christopher Wren obviously saw it to its completion before passing away. And I used to work there, so I know quite a bit about the place. But that was completed in a remarkably fast time, considering the scale and size of it. Most of them would take hundreds of years to build.
I'd like to just touch on the golden ratio again. Now, one of the best explanations for the golden ratio was actually in the Da Vinci Code with Robert Langdon. He did in the book, there's a little speech, and that sums it up absolutely perfectly. And that brings us on to Leonardo da Vinci, doesn't it? Because he uses the golden ratio and sacred geometry and was quite possibly a huge influence on that kind of thing now. With the
absolutely. I mean, definitely, it was. It's very much. It's been around since the ancient Greeks. Basically, they were building their temples to those kind of ratios, sort of 2000 BC. So yeah, I mean, it goes much further back than Da Vinci. But obviously, almost kind of discovering these ideas. That's one of the things. Obviously, the history is not continuous. Ideas come up and they're known and then they get forgotten. It's like the pyramid builders. We're still not entirely sure what made them decide to build those particular patterns and shapes. We could speculate, but we know no real knowledge. Them at the time would have known exactly why they were doing it, but to us, it still remains a bit of a mystery.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that kind of construction design goes back to, say, to the ancient Greeks, the idea of the golden ratio. They were the first sort of finders of that. And I know in the Renaissance period there was a kind of resurgence of Greek thinking, and Greek philosophy and Greek mathematics. So that was all part of that sort of general movement.
Mm. What do you think, Paul?
Do you know what? Right. As much as I love cathedrals and stuff, they're really not my bag.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. So, if Canterbury came up and they said, "Could you come and investigate it?" No go for you.
I'd go, but it wouldn't be. I wouldn't be walking around going, "Oh, look at that archway! It's an archway." Do you know what I mean? It's like. I've seen archways before. I've seen archways before. It's fine.
Such a Philistine, Paul. You're such a Philistine. My God, my goodness.
I can imagine the atmosphere in those sort of places would be absolutely tremendous, to be fair.
Because it's quite a shame, really, these big cathedrals, they're now they're tourist sort of like traps and stuff, but actually in their height of use, they would have been used a lot more than just for religious sort of services and stuff. They would have been hubs of communities, they would have had marketplaces inside, because it would have been the biggest cut and covered areas, and these places would have been used to their absolute maximum, and they must have been, really fascinating places to be a part of.
Absolutely, they were the centre of the community. They were the heart of any city. If you meet it's not so easy to see these days, but most cathedrals are the first thing you can see of a city in the distance. They would have been the tallest, largest building by some margin, apart from possibly a medieval castle nearby, but the cathedral would have been the real heart of the community. In fact, it wasn't until fairly recently that there was still a rule in London construction that nothing could be taller than St Paul's Cathedral. That only came to an end relatively recently. And even today, if you're travelling up, I think it's the M11, towards, I've got the name of the town. You need to come back to me. There is a town, it's just sort of home counties, and it's completely gone off from the top of my head. There is a town where the first thing you can see on the horizon, in the great distance, it still is away, is the cathedral. It's the most obvious thing you can still see, and that's even today. And I can't remember the name of the town. I go completely blank.
Ely?
What it's called? No. Oh, blimey, no. It's completely gone.
It'll come back to you at midnight tonight. You'll go, it's there. Because that happens to all of us, doesn't it? We always forget what we're going to say, and then we come off air, and then we go, why couldn't I not remember that at that moment?
It was partly because of having worked at St Paul's Cathedral, and because like your mum, we don't tend to take long holidays. We take a lot of weekend breaks, and my wife and I we sort of visit quite a few cathedrals just to have a look at the way they're built, just because I do find them fascinating. And we went to this particular town. The cathedral was quite nice, but the town was incredibly boring. It really was one of the dullest places I'd visited, because it had this beautiful medieval cathedral, and I can't remember. It's really going to bug me. But an example of where you can see the cathedral on the horizon for absolutely miles away before you get anywhere near the town itself.
I love them. And when I went to York City, I was absolutely blessed. It was right on top of Christmas, and they were practicing. The choir boys were all practicing, and the acoustics, it literally touched your soul. Do you know what I mean? It was just sublime. And what with the energy of the actual York Minster as well, everybody was hushed. The tourist thing had all come down. Everybody was sitting and just listening to these choir boys practicing their Christmas songs, and it was just so atmospheric. And literally the whole of the Minster was just filled with this most beautiful, music because of the acoustics. And I have to say, it was just an experience like I would never forget that experience. It was so touching.
Well, having worked in one at Christmas, I keep well away from at Christmas.
They are there. And what did you do at St Paul's Cathedral then, Andy?
I used to work. You might be surprised to hear this, but the actual retail side, they have a gift shop and they rent out the space in the crypt for corporate events. So I was part of the sales team for it, and the shop on its own was a multi-million-pound business. And the most evenings, the crypt of the cathedral is let out for various sort of corporate events, and basically part of the booking team, if you like, getting involved in that and sort of help out working with sorting the shop out. So that was my role there. Most people think of cathedral shops as being two little old biddies in the corner selling sort of books and candles and that kind of stuff. But no, as I say, it was a multi-million-pound business. They used to generate a lot of money. And so that was the sideline. The main thing was the selling of the space in the crypt of the cathedral, which is quite strange when you consider there are literally thousands and thousands of bodies buried there. It really is amazing.
Yeah, sort of quite a unique place to actually have a function. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean that was its selling point. That was made it quite unique. I mean, I'll tell you a couple of quick little stories about it. In the rear of the crypt, there's a very nice little chapel which is very ornately designed, and quite a few famous people are buried there. If you work at St Paul's Cathedral, you are entitled to be married at St Paul's Cathedral, but not in the main cathedral. You get married rather in the little place underneath in the crypt area, and there's upwards of 10,000 bodies buried in that area. Well, lots of them, of course, are unmarked graves. And what would happen often at night, people would sneak down their relative and bury them themselves, because the original floor of the crypt was just dirt. There was no sort of stone paved or anything. It became paved much later on. And they'd literally just sort of sneak down, dig a little hole, stick the relative in it and cover it up again and head off. So they don't really have full records of exactly how many people are buried down there, but they know it's in the tens of thousands, certainly. But St Albans, that was the town I was thinking of. It'll come to you eventually. St Albans Cathedral can be seen for absolutely miles away, even today, despite modern building. But so it was a fascinating place to work and be involved in. And just a little sideline, as you probably know, there was it's been 3 St Paul's Cathedrals, but the previous one was destroyed in the Great Fire of 1666, and the new one was built on its site. Now, there are supposedly only 6 original stone burial monuments left from the actual Great Fire of London in the crypt, because most of the building collapsed down into the crypt, thus destroying pretty much everything. There's officially recorded 6. If you get any books about it, you'll see it says there are 6 memorials that survived, and they are these XYZ. Sorry, excuse me. My desk in my little office was on the 7th. That was not supposed to even exist. Somehow it was completely missed from every book. But the stone tablet on the floor underneath my desk was from the previous St Paul's Cathedral. So there are actually 7 monuments that survived, memorial stones that survived, not 6. But it's always been recorded as being only 6. But when you look around at the books and you look around, you can find the ones identified. And there's this 7th one, which is where my desk was. That seemed to be missed by just about every historian who's written about the old St Paul's Cathedral and what survived from the Great Fire. And I think it's because it's in the section the public can't get to, because it's the private offices part. But yeah, so it's quite interesting, I think.
That's why I missed it, because your desk was on it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I wouldn't be my feet.
Yeah. How fantastic is that, though? Could you imagine? Here's your desk. You go, oh my God, look what I'm on. Oh my God, that's amazing.
That's what they say to you. Don't worry, there's bodies absolutely everywhere. You are completely surrounded by them, both in the floor and in the walls. So they're everywhere. But another nice little thing about working there was the current St Paul's Cathedral is slightly smaller than the previous one. And obviously, you probably know, it was built on the site of the previous cathedral. Now, in the immediate vicinity around the outside wherever you dig down a few feet, you start hitting old St. Paul's. And because there's so much of it, they collect all the bits of any interest, or, you know, inscriptions, or of any kind of carvings, or any kind of obvious piece of building work. But below a certain size, they tend to just throw it back into the pit because there's literally so much of the small pieces of it. And I was actually there when they were doing another dig, and basically said, you know, if you find a little bit, you want to keep it. So I did. I have a small piece of St. Paul's Cathedral in my office. So.
Good evening.
Oh, Mr. Manley, we finally let you off the naughty chair, have we?
I completely forgot, to be absolutely honest. I raided my daughter's bedroom and went mad tidying it. And then I looked at my phone and went, oh, couple of rude words, and then tried to join you on my normal Skype, and it wouldn't let me. So I've just had to get my tablet all sorted out so I can join you on this.
Well, thank you very much for everyone for listening tonight, and you're more than welcome to join us, Mark. Perhaps we can fit you in for a couple of minutes. And how's your paranormal sort of month been?
Absolutely enjoyed last night, didn't we? Lindsay had the best time ever doing that last night, being back with the team and having our old team back. You know, Kerry and Paul leaning over the counter, looking happy. Do you know what Paul reminded me of? Do you remember Open All Hours?
Not upright.
Yeah, he reminded me of Arkwright without the tash.
Oh, it's not really complimentary, Mark.
There you go.
But no, last night was really good fun. Loved it. And it's been a good, very busy month so far. Oh.
So you've got plenty in the pipeline coming up then.
Yeah, we've got, what have we got coming up? We have got, sorry, Lindsay, as you can hear, came back from there with an awful cough and cold. So she's been dying all day. Yeah, we have got Epic Forest on the 1st of April, and then we have got Westlands Island Abandoned RAF base in May. And I'd like to do possibly Hockley Woods in June, and then I've forgotten what it is we're going to do for July. Oh yeah, the Lyme Regis and Charmouth historical walk and ghost walk in July, and then I'd like to do another set of woods in August.
You go down to the woods, yeah.
If you go down to the woods today, you're in for a big surprise because Richard is there with his camcorder and everybody dies. Anyway. So, yes. A lot going on, and I'm really looking forward to the radio shows because we've got a lot of interesting stuff coming up, actually.
Yes, I'm looking forward to what you've got coming up. Because what's your next show? Because I couldn't understand it when Kerry said it. It's what's it called?
Tuatha De Danann.
Yeah, what is it?
The Tuatha De Danann would have, you know, in legend you've got people talking about the precursors.
Yes.
Well, the Tuatha De Danann are the precursors of the Irish people.
Oh, right.
And there's so many different legends, there's so many different sagas and legacies. And if you listen to one, they're fairies. If you listen to another, they're aliens. If you listen to another, they're gods. So if you listen to the Northern Ireland ones, like the Ulster ones, the Ulster sagas, they say that they turned into fae folk, fairies. But when you look at all the other legends, it's precursors or aliens, not quite sure, but they certainly had technology that we haven't even got yet, you know?
Well, this is again, we've approached this from different angles because I always understood the Tuatha De Danann as the fairy folk, whereas Mark then sent me some research and it was complete, and I was like, hang on, this isn't what I knew about it. So we're having some really interesting discussions at the moment behind the scenes to bring you lots of different myths and legends regarding it, aren't we, Mark?
Yeah, it's like I say, the Northern Ireland, if you want to get to go to the Ulster Chronicles, that's the legends of them turning into the fae folk. And, you know, what you were saying about the rings, and they can only come back and interact for us via these rings, because they're like the doorways, the fairy rings. But when you go to the rest of Ireland, you know, southern, east and west, it's gods or aliens or precursors, and they had all this weird and wonderful technology, and they went to war and they helped man, and they fought with man, and then they decided, oh, we don't like you very much, and then they disappeared. There's an island off of Ireland that appears every now and again in shroud and fog, and they're supposed to have gone there. But they're also supposed
But that's a different show. We're going to be doing Disappearing Islands on a different show because that, again, it's a hugely fascinating subject, isn't it? And again, full of myths and legends.
Exactly.
Are you talking about High Brazil off the coast of Ireland?
That's the bunny.
Yeah. Quite a fascinating story in itself. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But again, disappearing islands, they occur not just there, but in lots of different places around the world. There's one that's supposed to appear on a loch in Scotland as well, a disappearing island. And again, they're full of myths and legends. I love a bit of myth and legend, me.
Don't talk about disappearing islands and lochs in front of Paul. He'll start singing the familiness again. Please don't.
That was last week.
And Tuatha De Danann is supposed to be to do with King Arthur and Avalon as well. So, you know.
Oh, so you can be kept pretty busy then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, to be absolutely honest, I mean, my co-host, she's a lovely lady and she's got her own business to do anyway. So she's not exactly sitting down on her pert derriere doing nothing. But I do all the research whilst she sits back and talks about crystals.
And then now and again I throw him a curveball and say, hang on a minute, I thought it was about this. And he goes, oh no. So it's sort of kind of how it works.
Yeah. We had a bit of an interesting conversation earlier, didn't we?
Yeah, I was like, honestly, I was like, oh my word, that's not what I thought at all. But like I say, different thing, you know, there are so many aspects to every subject that.
Regional legend, I think they call it.
Yeah, you can talk about and look at it from so different angles. I've once said that we could all do a show on the same subject, yet come up with 5 different shows because every subject has so many different aspects to it, and that's what makes this whole subject, or the unexplained, or myths, legends, so interesting because there are so many different aspects to it all. Andy, I'm sure you know that side of it, really. The different stories and stuff about things.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as you know, my next book, which is now finally with our publisher, finally finished, is talking about folklore and folk magic. So yes, very much so. I was going to say, have you come across Barry Fitzgerald's book on the Fae folk of North of Ireland? He's recently been published. He very much goes into the myths and legends there, and again comes down with the idea that these are much more dark, sinister figures than perhaps sort of we wouldn't generally think of them as being. It's certainly worth getting hold of his book. I mean, the guy, as you know, Barry Fitzgerald from TAPS, etc., the Ghost Hunters program. I knew him many years ago before he was involved in all that. So
I know this chap. Yes, I know you mean.
Yeah, most people. We think you were talking about. Yeah.
He has actually agreed to do a show discussion.
Oh, excellent!
Has he?
Yeah, I asked him quite a while ago. But I've just been busy with other things, so I've still got to arrange the interview. But yeah, he did agree to do an interview.
Oh, get on with it, because I want to hear that show.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll arrange it. I'll get it done.
Yeah, it's like the two Kerrys. They do like doing an interview together. They were, after the Jack the Ripper one they done last week, they both Skyped me, and they were both bouncing off the walls.
Honestly, that is the only downside to radio broadcasting, is that when you come off a show and you're really pleased with it and it's gone so well that you get a buzz, and then you're sat there in your home and you're like, oh, right, okay, I want a party now. Do you know what I mean? And you've got like no one at home, and you're like, right, I'm going to Skype to somebody, and we're like, get Richard in, get the boss in so we can get some praise.
Yeah, so due praise was given, and it was a good show. You did sort of like handle the interview really well. Interesting subject matter.
Absolutely fascinating. I can't wait to work a little more with Russell, because he changed my opinion. I read quite a lot about Jack the Ripper, and he changed my opinion a little bit, I have to say.
Block your ears, Andy. You probably won't like this.
No, I work with Andy too. I can't wait to work with Andy either.
No, it's just yeah, okay.
Oh, right, okay. I'm sure we'll have a proper discussion again.
Quietly carry on, just listening.
I'm moving swiftly on.
Yes, carry on.
But Barry Fitzgerald, yeah, his book In the Mists of Gods, it's worth getting your hands on, because he definitely goes into that kind of material as well. Obviously, you've done your own research too, but it's what I've seen of it. I mean, I'm not reading it myself, but what I know of things, I know the publisher that is pretty good. Yeah, so definitely.
I mean, the only trouble with that is because we've got to fit it into a 1-hour radio show. There are so many legends and aspects and characters in the whole of the Tuatha De Danann saga. It's just like, where do you start? So I'm just sticking with the Southern Ireland ones for now.
Yeah, I think I'm going to push you more into the other side of it. I'm trying to go on, let's talk about the fairy side of it.
I'll tell you what, we can do one show on Northern Ireland and one show on Southern Ireland, yeah?
I'm sure he covers both. I'm just double checking, actually. I think he covers the whole island.
Yeah, yeah. We're still in discussion about the show. Let's put it out there. We're just talking about it still. But whatever, it's going to be fascinating and interesting, as all the shows turn out to be, because it brings stuff to you that you, even like when you're researching a show, you go, I didn't know that. You know, it's just fascinating. I like the whole thing because you get to know about things that you didn't know before, and you have the opportunity to bring it to people that listen to the shows, and that's a gift.
Often that's the fun, is that you do the research and think, oh, that's interesting, let's talk about that. You know, I find that fascinating too. You're learning yourself when you sort of put together a show.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, like I say, it's absolutely fascinating. And I feel so blessed to be able to do it, because I'd read a book or something like that, but I wouldn't actually research it like you do when you're putting together a show. It takes work. And I've got a fantastic researcher. You know, I can't deny my Mark. He's absolutely brilliant. He comes up with some things that, like I say, he throws me curveballs every single week. And then I look into it and I'm like, oh my goodness, how did he find that? Do you know what I mean? He's brilliant. Yeah. He's really good at what he does.
Excellent.
Flattery will get you everywhere.
I know.
What can I say? I'm not going to be able to get my head through the doorway in a minute.
Don't worry, I'll soon prick that bubble soon.
Anyway.
So what's Paul's show about this week? Changing the subject.
Absolutely. My show this week, I'm interviewing a guy called Stephen Vernon. He basically set up his paranormal team, and it's not been going that long, so it's just basically promoting him and looking at setting up a paranormal team for anyone that would be interested. Some of the pitfalls and things to be wary of, and best place to get your equipment from and stuff like that. So that's what we're talking about.
Is he event based, or is he private? Like, you know, just goes out.
He does private investigations and stuff like that. So I think he is looking at doing some events, but not just enough to get his liability insurance and stuff like that. So
okay.
Interesting. I know Tara's doing tomorrow evening John Reginald Christie, the famous murderer from the 1940s and 50s. And
isn't that the 10 Ridlington Place one?
Yeah.
Ridlington Place, yeah, that was on recently, wasn't it? With what's his name played the role. Although the version with Richard Attenborough is probably creepier actually than the recent TV version. That's really got darkly sinister as well. Getting hold of it, you can, the film with Richard Attenborough in the role.
I watched the one over Christmas. That was good. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. What was his name? Tim Roth played him, didn't he?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
But he sort of played a very sort of dour sort of role, didn't he? In it, he was very sort of slow and methodical. But it's always been an interesting story of mine, because it was my first introduction into the macabre. Was when I went to Madame Tussauds many years ago, and then down into the infamous Chamber of Horrors. And they had his display down there, which was a waxwork of him standing in a cellar, I believe, with a paintbrush and sort of very hastily painted walls, and that sort of put the fear of God into me for weeks after that.
Excuse me.
Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to that show.
Yeah, and Kerry Ann's got a interview, I believe, this week.
Do you know what? I don't know.
Normal service will be resumed.
Tell that Richard knows. What was it, Richard? Do you know?
Yes, I do know, but I've forgotten the guy's name. But she's doing a interview this week with an American chap who's involved in several haunted cases over in the United States. The Sally House, I believe. Do you know about this place?
That rings a bell.
Oh, wasn't that the guy that was in the chat room the other night?
Yes, that's right.
Oh, goodness me. Oh, Kerry Ann, you are in the chat room, Kerry Ann. Tell us his name, please, because we've both forgotten.
Wasn't it Simmons? Michael or Mark Simmons or something like that?
Oh, Zimmerman?
Yeah.
I hope he's not listening. He's probably thinking.
I know. He's probably thinking, oh my God, how awful is that?
Well,
I do apologise.
We're guessing and we're narrowing it down slowly. We're getting there.
Yeah. I think, yeah. Anyway, I don't think that. I'm not going to say any more in case I'm wrong. But it's going to be a fascinating interview, whatever, because he's done. I do know. He's, like you said, Paul. He's done some really interesting cases, hasn't he? Or like investigations.
Yeah, I mean, I'm as I said, I'm really looking forward to listening to all the shows this week, actually, because it seems quite good. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
We do have a sort of quite packed week, and so well, I suppose we can really sort of go ahead and wrap that up now. Paul, do you think?
I think so, absolutely. So, obviously, I mean, it's your radio station.
Yeah. Oh, yes, right. Well, and I'll go around everyone, and thanks, guys, for joining us tonight. Kerry.
Oh, thank you.
Mark, for joining us. Andy.
Good fun as always.
Yeah,
exactly.
Paul.
I'm sorry I was late.
That's okay. And Paul, thanks a lot for letting us use your studio again.
Not a problem.
And it only leaves it for me to say good night, everybody, and remember, enjoy your week.
Yeah.
Don't have nightmares.
Yeah, don't have nightmares.
Have a safe week, and see you all again very soon.
See you soon, guys.
The T-Files here at Parasearch UK Radio, discussing hauntings from around the world, the facts and the hearsay about each case. Was it real haunting or an elaborate hoax for monetary gain or fame? Listen and discuss with me, Terra Palmer, here at the T-Files.
Join Paul Rook live at 9 p.m. for the Trident Paranormal Show, where he will be discussing and explaining everything from the strange, weird and the paranormal myths and legends. From fact and fiction, we have all on the Trident Paranormal Show.
Join Jay and Teresa Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. with their paranormal hindsight from across the USA, only on Parasearch UK Radio.
Join Richard Clements on Thursday nights at 10 p.m. for the Mystery Hour, only on Parasearch UK Radio.